Coming up on today's show, we're going to hear directly from the 12s with their reaction to Pete Carroll being ousted as the Seattle Seahawks head coach. But first, we want to make sure you have your notifications turned on. If you had your noties turned on Wednesday, then you were alerted immediately when we had a short out on the channel with my thoughts within seconds, when we went live on the channel, when we had our reaction, our replacements, all of that. You were the first to know about it. Don't miss out on that opportunity again. Make sure you got your noties on so you stay up to date when we have new content each and every day here on Seahawks Today, and so you are alerted when we go live right here on Seahawks Today. Let's start with a $50 super chat from Mark Sanchez. Bang. Mark says, finally, I appreciate everything he did, but this needs to happen. Bottom line, Mark is spot on here. Look, we can all sit here today and say that we appreciate Pete Carroll, but love what he did for this organization, and that he's the greatest coach in the history of this franchise, that there was no better era for Seahawks football than what we witnessed with Pete Carroll over this last 14 years. But we can also say that this season was a failure, that the Seahawks did not meet their goals, that this team underachieved, that they did not perform to their potential of this roster. And that falls on the head coach. Pete Carroll is the number one person to blame for that. It was time. All good things must come to an end. I hate that it had to be this way, but it's unfortunate. Pete's still going to stick around within the organization, so that's good. But this was the right call. Mark, you're absolutely right about that. Thanks for the $50 super chat. Daniel checking in with a 50 from Sweden says, I'm scared of appointing Dan Quinn. Isn't it time for Seattle to get an offensive mind like Eric Bieniemy or Ben Johnson? Daniel, thanks for that super chat. Let's start off one by one here. Kind of dissect this piece by piece. Dan Quinn, look, there's going to be a lot of teams that would love to have Dan Quinn as their head coach, and his name is going to come up for several different jobs, not just this one here in Seattle. Dan Quinn is probably the best defensive coordinator in the NFL right now with what he's done with the Dallas Cowboys. We know what he did in Seattle previously. Great defensive mind. But here is my fear, Daniel. Is Dan Quinn just a great head coach, great DC and an average head coach? Because think about with the Atlanta Falcons, okay, 28-3. We all remember it. What happened after that? Well, it ended very poorly with not only blowing that lead in the Super Bowl, but then the way things transitioned afterwards with how they fell apart, that Falcons team did with changing coordinators from Kyle Shanahan to then replacing him after that with Steve Sarkisian, and then Matt Ryan was never the same quarterback again. And that organization, it was a downward spiral from there. And the big question became of Dan Quinn's time in Atlanta was their success just a byproduct of Kyle Shanahan. And that's what I fear with Dan Quinn. Now, the other parts, an offensive mind, I would love an offensive mind. I don't know if Eric Bieniemy is ready to be a head coach yet. I didn't like the way things ended at Washington. Ben Johnson's an intriguing name. He's going to get a lot of interest. He'll be a head coach with what he's done with the Detroit Lions this year. He's been fantastic. It's very interesting, Daniel. We'll see. Blake, with a $5 super chat, says, Vrabel is by far the best option. Quinn would lead as a good DC, but can't lead a team. Don't hire someone just because they have team ties. And that's going to be one thing with Pete Carroll staying around in the organization in an advisory role, John Schneider still staying around and all that. They are very familiar with Dan Quinn. He's basically one of their own, and that's going to help his chances of getting this job. Vrabel, I like a lot. I really do. I thought he was wrongfully fired at Tennessee. I think he's a top 5 coach in this league. I like Vrabel, but I would be surprised if they haven't. If they go with a defensive-minded guy, I think Quinn's the direction they lead. Thanks for the super chat, Blake. Michael Hyde with a $10 super chat. Bang, says, I think we should get Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer. The Huskies ran a deadly West Coast air raid offense, the same type of offense that McVay and Shanahan run. I know Pac-12 defenses suck, but we could win the jackpot. All right, Michael Hyde. Let's start with Penix and then go with DeBoer. Michael Penix, I'm a big fan of. I know that he didn't play great in the national championship game, but this is a guy that commands an offense that has what he needs to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. He's a good decision maker. He's got decent arm strength, and he is mobile enough. You're not going to see him run for 100 yards in a game, but you're not going to see him take a ton of sacks either. He knows how to escape in the pocket enough. He's a very smart quarterback that's beyond his years and can hold his own in the pocket. So I do like Michael Penix. He might be available when the Seahawks pick at 16. As far as Kalen DeBoer goes, DeBoer's been a winner. No question about it. With what he's done with the Washington Huskies, they're about to make a move to the Big Ten. There's a lot of excitement, even though they didn't win the Natty this year, of what they're building with that Washington program for years to come. With the talent that they've developed there, Kalen DeBoer's done an incredible job. But this is somebody, this is the big but here, that has no NFL ties at all. His coaching career started, winning championships at the NAIA, goes to Fresno, now at Washington. Like, it's a big adjustment going from the college game to the NFL game. It's not like Jim Harbaugh, who's coached successfully at the NFL level. With Kalen DeBoer, I mean, it would be a big adjustment. It's not coaching boys, you're coaching men. And that's what I would fear when it comes to Kalen DeBoer, but he is an excellent head coach for sure at the college level. The man himself with a $5 super chat says, love for Pete always, but ironically, I'd love to see Jim Harbaugh as head coach. Two arch enemies under the same roof could be epic. I don't think Harbaugh's getting the job. I think it's Dan Quinn. But Harbaugh would be the guy who would hire. If I was John Schneider, if I was Jody Allen making this call of who should be the next head coach for the Seattle Seahawks, my personal choice would be Jim Harbaugh, a guy that's won everywhere at every level, college, pro, the lower ranks, even at San Diego, University of San Diego, for crying out loud. He's great when it comes to offense, an offensive mind, former quarterback, great when it comes to the offensive line. He wants to be at the NFL level. I do think he's going to take an NFL job, but I just don't see that being the case of him ending up in Seattle. It'd be a good fit, but I think Seattle is pretty well set with the idea of Dan Quinn being that next guy. What about Harbaugh? Weigh in, tell me what you think. Do you want Seattle to pursue Jim Harbaugh as their next head coach? Weigh in, our pinned comment today. Why for yes, in for no, if you want Harbaugh in Seattle or not. All offseason long, we're going to be covering this team like no one else is. Man, we went from 0 to 100 real quick. Right out of the playoffs to a coaching search within a matter of moments. And we've been all over here on the channel. We're going to have our shorts. We're going to do our live shows. Whenever the hiring is made, you better believe we're going to go live here on Seahawks Today. And we've been all over it, tracking planes and all sorts of stuff. This is going to be the place to be. You can count on us here on Seahawks Today like no one else. Subscribe now. Join the family. Keep it locked into Seahawks Today. We'll have you covered throughout the entire coaching search. Trill the photographer says, #Seahawks, how will Pete Carroll being in the front office affect us? Will he still be a negative impact pulling strings behind the scenes, or will Schneider have full control now? So it's interesting you bring that up because I think there's still the power of influence, right? Where Pete Carroll can kind of direct things a certain direction to an extent, but he's not going to have final say. Like, I don't see Pete Carroll wanting Jim Harbaugh to be his replacement, but I do see Pete Carroll saying, you know what, Dan Quinn would be great to have back here. Kind of the nudge of some sorts. Like, that's how I see is those nudges. He's never going to have final say on anything, but he's going to be nudging, saying, hey, you need to do this, and kind of, where to circle things to. So this is going to be John Schneider's ship now. This is going to be his organization to run going forward, and I still think there's influence, but not control from Pete. Peter writes in, should we learn more on an offensive head coach, or I think that means lean, or a defensive head coach? I would lean towards an offensive-minded guy. That's the direction the NFL is heading. We're seeing more and more offensive-minded head coaches get jobs than we are seeing defensive-minded head coaches. But with Schneider still leading the way, I think that they're going to lean towards a defensive-minded coach. And not even, let's say that things don't work out with Dan Quinn. You start to look around. It's not Dan Quinn. If it's not Jim Harbaugh. Mike Vrabel is very much a defensive-minded coach. Mike McDonald, the DC of the Baltimore Ravens, is getting a lot of attention. Very good defensive coordinator. I still think that with the way this organization operates, they'll lean towards defense. The Boskin weighing in says the best part of Pete stepping down is Hurt's no longer the DC of the Hawks. Man, what did we tell you? Folks, this is why you subscribe to Seahawks Today, because what did we say? What did we say on Sunday, folks? That it was Jover. We said that it was time for this Seahawks team to not just move on from Pete, but to clean house. That they needed a clean reset, a new head coach to come in and pick a new staff to go a whole different direction. And Clint Hurtt wasn't the right guy to lead this defense. His 2 years as DC was terrible. Shane Waldron, it was a roller coaster. And that offense underachieved. They need a new direction offensively. I would be shocked if the new head coach of the Seattle Seahawks team retains Waldron and Clint Hurtt. I think there's going to be some big changes. The Smitty Committee says, what do you think the main reason they moved on from Pete? It's pretty simple. Team underachieved. Simple as that. I mean, honestly, had the Seahawks made the playoffs, if the Bears beat the Packers, not only are we getting ready for a playoff game this week, I think Pete probably lives to see another year and comes back. I think it was that close of a decision because they didn't announce this immediately after the game. They didn't announce this on Black Monday. They waited till Wednesday. I think Jody and this organization, they were kind of undecided, that they didn't make up their minds. Because what should have happened, how it should have been handled if this was your decision, you shouldn't have let Pete go out there and publicly say that he wants to keep this job and want to remain head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. What you should have done for damage control, if this is the decision you really wanted, was the moment Pete came off that football field in Arizona, you pull him aside and say, this is your last game. This is it. We're going in another direction. We're hiring a new head coach. Let's make this transition as smooth as possible. To me, that tells me they didn't have that decision fully made just yet before they announced this Wednesday. Was moving on from Pete Carroll the right decision or the wrong decision? What do you guys think? R for right, W for wrong. Weigh in. Tell us what you think. Subscribe now to Seahawks Today. We're going to be all over it here the next few days with this coaching search. We'll lock in with daily updates, what's going on, and you'll be the first to know when the Seahawks have a brand new head coach. Keep it locked in. We'll have you covered here on Seahawks Today.